I don't think Робb is really trying to be political by sending his peace terms because he knows that they're not going to be accepted. It's more he's staking his claim, and he's saying that he's not going to be cowed by the Lannisters. He's not intimidated by them. He's already had a few battles against Tywin's forces, and he's won those battles.
Робb is impressing and surprising everyone with his acumen as a leader. We see that Робb has been beating the Lannisters in the field. His conversation with Jaime makes it clear that militarily he's much more savvy and dangerous than any of them had reckoned.
By season 2, Tywin recognizes that this kid knows what he's doing, and if they're going to beat them, they need to step up their game.
Jon has certain impulse control issues. He's a bit hot-headed, but he's just disgusted by the whole scene here. And when this man calls him a southerner, which is sort of an insult to a northerner, he opens his big mouth in a strategically inappropriate place.
It wasn't his place to speak out at that time, and Mormont, criticizes him pretty harshly for that. The one thing Mormont sees in Snow is a real capacity for leadership. I definitely think that Jon looks at Mormont as a father figure. I think that relationship was starting to develop at the end of season 1, and the fact that this man is willing to speak to him, sometimes quite roughly, but always honestly, he's been looking for that for a long time. As much as Jon admired Ned Stark, I think he feels a real sense of grievance that Ned wasn't honest to him. It's a boy who's grown up with a real chip on his shoulder, who's always been looking for a strong paternal figure, and now seems like he's found one with Mormont.
We meet Stannis, who's a very pragmatic, very practical man, but he's decided to take up and link forces with a witch, basically, because he realizes that it could advance his cause.
It's introducing a new religion, also a new world to the show, a whole new set of characters, a new location, which is Dragonstone and Stannis Baratheon, Melisandre, the Red Priestess, and Davos Seaworth.
One of the things we love about George's world is they're so well and fully realized. There's not one old religion and one new religion. There are many religions. Stannis has thrown over the religion of his ancestors in favor of a new religion, the religion of the Lord of Light.
This religion is beginning to make inroads in Westeros. For many centuries, the Seven have been the dominant religion. All the people there witnessing the burning of the idols grew up with the religion of the Seven, and now they're turning their backs on that.
The priestess of this religion, Melisandre, the Red Woman, she believes Stannis to be a savior figure, the son of fire who's meant to come and save the world from the darkness that is encroaching upon it. What's interesting about Melisandre is that her powers are real, as she demonstrates.
It's a very good question what Stannis believes, and when he comes to believe it. It's possible that he sees this as a religion of expediency, and he's able to use the religion and Melisandre, this charismatic priestess, as a means to an end. And of course that end is gaining the Iron Throne.
They haunt me.
First of all, I think it's easy to forget because Littlefinger is so eloquent and so well groomed, and because he's got other important jobs. But Littlefinger's a pimp, and he's not going to let his these women who work for him spoil his investments. They're there to make money for him, and if she's not going to make money for him, she's not going to be there for much longer, one way or another. So he makes that very, very clear.
We've never really heard about Littlefinger actually hurting anybody. And this is the first indication that this person who is willing to stab people in the back figuratively might also be willing to do that literally as well, or pay other people to do it for him, which of course is how Littlefinger does things.
And that's a scene that we were looking forward to from the beginning. It's such a good scene in the books, and I think it's one of the first times you really see how good Tyrion's going to be at what he's doing, because he's such an operator, and he gets Janet Slint quite comfortable and relaxed before really slipping the knife into him.
He does know that this is a person he can't trust. This is a person who turned on Ned Stark without any compunction and would do the same to him if he thought it was in his best interest. He also knows this is a person who has absolutely no moral center at all and would order and carry out the killing of children without even, doesn't show any remorse about it. And Tyrion, as someone who was weak in the midst of strength, has a real sympathy for the weak and sympathy for the powerless. And the idea that somebody would do what Janos Slint did, I think, rubs him very much the wrong way. And you can feel the relish that he takes in sending this guy to the shittiest place on earth.
And how do you feel about that?
From Theon's point of view, he didn't ask to be sent off to Winterfell. His father gave him away. It was part of the peace negotiation, and yet Theon is blamed for all that. So Theon it seems so incredibly unfair to him. He didn't ask for any of this.
He's trying to do the right thing. He's trying to be a good man. He's trying to be the right kind of man for his father and his family. And it's an incredibly tough road. A man of stronger character might have handled it differently. Theon is great because he's got a weak character in a lot of ways, which makes him more human, and we see him struggle with this stuff.
And he is put in a place where he really needs to decide on short order who he is and which master he's going to serve, because he can't serve both.
Brian Cogman wrote the script, and Alex Zakharov, our director, had the really inspired idea where each of those three scenes bleeds into each other, and so Tyrion is basically using the same ruse on three different men. It's a trick that comes straight from the book, where Tyrion knows someone's been betraying the former hands and giving information to his sister, and he wants to know who it is.
But remember, you must tell no one.
Tell no one what?
The scene is almost like a manifestation of how Tyrion's mind works, where all three of these pieces are the part of a whole, and you never would have gotten the sense of that you get from the scene if Alec hadn't shot it so brilliantly.
The thing about Tyrion is he has respect for these men. He might not like them. He doesn't really like them, most of them, but he does respect them. He respects their minds and how crafty they are.
He's not just trying to find a piece of information. He's trying to send a message about who the new sheriff in town is and how that sheriff operates. He wants everyone to know that he knows how this game is played.
This is a deeply sexist world, and this is not a world where women are knights, and women are expected to be, if they're highborn women like Brienne is, she's expected to be a wife. She's not expected to be someone who's fighting on the battlefield or fighting in a melee with someone like Loras.
Yield! I yield!
And she's constantly having to show that she's actually just as good at this as the men are, and in fact better. I mean, Loras is a quite renowned fighter, and she beats him.
This is a world where power has a male face, and Brienne's come from a place where she was allowed to pursue her dreams. She was allowed to be who she really was, in the way that Ned was letting Arya become who she really wanted to be.
I'm no lady.
There's this wonderful moment that's not even verbal, it's just all on Michelle Fairley's face when she hears those words from Brienne, and you kind of know, if you've been watching the series, she's thinking about Arya, and this girl she loves so much she hasn't seen in such a long time, and Brienne is very different in some respects from Arya, but on the other hand you could see Arya really admiring Brienne because she always kind of wanted to be that.
I think Catelyn sees a real connection between these two sword-fighting women. Everyone's felt the imposter complex. Everyone's found themselves in a position where they're trying to act like they belong in a place where they don't belong. And I think there's something universal about that feeling, and Theon is just almost the pure embodiment of that.
I think part of him is kind of like, well, you have to be true to your family, and Robb probably should have listened to Catelyn's advice and not been so dunderheaded as to send Theon Greyjoy off to Balon Greyjoy without expecting that Theon's loyalties might be compromised. I've always loved Theon. I always loved the character in the books, and I always loved the prospect of what he could be in our series. And it all comes down to this. He's having a long, dark night of the soul. He has to make a decision. T.S. Eliot talked about the objective correlative, which is that object that can provide the emotional resonance and make it seem real, as opposed to just talking about loyalty. You actually have it. You have that object there. It's the letter. It's all about what he does with this letter.
The burning of the letter tells you what you need to know about the choice he's made, but the baptism scene shows you more visibly and more intuitively what it means to him to be accepted into his family and to become a real member of his family for the first time in as long as he can remember.
It's one of those scenes we love because there's so much that's conveyed without any dialogue. Just the visual imagery conveys what you need to know, and then it's also just Alfie's performance, and what you see on his face as the water's going down his head.
What is dead may never die.
What is dead may never die, but rises again, harder and stronger.
Some of the bannermen, particularly Roose Bolton, are of the opinion that prisoners are an encumbrance. This is not a world where they have great prison camps set up or something where they can send these guys. They don't have plastic cuffs or anything. I mean, it's actually quite difficult to feed and maintain a prisoner population. It'd be a hell of a lot easier to kill the commoners and ransom off the nobleborn, or torture them to get some intelligence.
In my family, we say, a naked man has few secrets. A flayed man, none.
He's kind of a Geneva Convention kind of a guy, Робб Старк.
My father outlawed flaying in the north.
We're not in the north.
What happens on the battlefield happens on the battlefield, and after the battle's done, there are codes of conduct that you follow.
We're not torturing them.
It's interesting to see the divergent reactions between him and his bannermen when they come upon Talissa, who is seeing after one of the Lannister wounded.
Surely one of our men needs your attention more than this cub.
Your men are not my men, my lord.
Put this in your mouth and lie down. You don't want to watch.
You see the distaste on the face of his bannerman, who thinks that this is a kind of a weak thing to do and a soft thing to do.
As much as Roose Bolton might seem to be this brutal ally, he does have a point. You know, I mean, he's, from his point of view, we're in this war to win it. You know, and if you want to win a war, you have to make some pretty horrible decisions.
The high road's very pretty, but you'll have a hard time marching your army down it.
What's that smell?
Dead people.
Part of this season is instrumental in carving out Arya's transformation from the lovable sort of moppet that she was in season 1. She finds her way into Harrenhal.
Where she starts to mutter the names of all the men and women she wants to kill who have wronged her family. And it becomes this kind of prayer for her, and it's something that's going to go on, because you have the sense that Arya's not going to sleep very well until she's avenged her father, and that's going to take some time.
You don't see fear on her face when she's looking at death. You see mounting rage that's taking root inside her, and it's almost like it's tempering steel.
I think she's ready to kill somebody. I mean, she's not going to escape from Harrenhal by herself. There's just too many guards out there. If she's going to go down, you get the sense she's going to take at least one of them with her.
Cersei. Ill in pain. The Hound.
Whose banner is that?
My own.
Suppose if we use the same one, the battle will be terribly confusing.
That scene is kind of the fulcrum of the seesaw. You know, it's like either they will come to some agreement and a great chapter of bloodshed and potential tearing apart of many, many lives will either be stopped there or will not be.
You should kneel before your brother. He's the Lord's chosen. Born amidst salt and smoke.
Born amidst salt and smoke. Is he a ham?
It's almost like they're two teenage boys fighting with each other. These two boys who never really liked each other. And so much of it comes down to their personal animosity.
Catelyn in that scene realizes the implications of the failing of this particular meeting and what it means for all the kingdoms.
If you were sons of mine, I would knock your heads together and lock you in a bedchamber until you remembered that you were brothers.
Renly has a more, in some ways, a more enlightened view of what, and a more practical view of what it means to rule. And it's often pointed out to him that doesn't have the right to the throne because he's the younger brother.
It is strange to find you beside my brother, Lady Stark. Your husband was a supporter of my claim. Lord Eddard's integrity cost him his head. And you sit beside this pretender and chastise me.
And he points out something that should be obvious to anybody watching the show or invested in this story, which is that nobody really had the right to, Robert didn't have the right to the throne, and the Targaryens didn't have the right to the throne, and the power ultimately resides in the hands of the people who seize it.
Look across those fields, brother. Can you see all those banners?
You think a few bolts of cloth will make you king?
No. The men holding those bolts of cloth will make me king.
He's saying, people love me, I have 100,000 men behind me, which dwarfs the size of your army. I would make a better ruler than you, which is unquestionably true. And Stannis would be a terrible king, most likely, because he's just lacks a feeling for the common humanity over which he's supposed to rule.
We shall see, Renly. Come the dawn, we shall see.
Well, what's great about Littlefinger, you never know exactly what he's up to. The confusion you feel about Littlefinger's motivations also, I think, helps you feel that Littlefinger's motivations run deeper.
Littlefinger is absolutely hedging his bets and about doing what's best for Littlefinger and protecting himself. And he knows that this war is entirely unpredictable. He's just really trying to be everyone's friend, even though no one really trusts him. He He wants to be in there so that regardless of what comes to pass, he will survive.
One of the things that's most fun about the Tyrells is the way that they're basically a secret matriarchy. I mean, the Tyrells are a family where the men tend to be handsome dopes, and the women are really the brains behind the operation.
The wonderful thing about Marjorie and Natalie Dormer's performance of her, she's very politically shrewd and aware. I don't think of her as conniving really in a negative way, but she's someone who's absolutely willing to be political and to play the game.
She's in some ways not unlike Cersei, but she's like a more balanced, less damaged version of Cersei. She's someone who knows how to put on a demure face, and she knows how to show the world the face that they expect to see from her, and she also knows how to take that mask off.
Do you want to be a queen?
No. I want to be the queen.
The half-hand does things in his own time. My uncle told me stories about him. Most of them are true.
Really, in the way that boys in our world might grow up idolizing football players or basketball players, I mean, the boys in this world, they look up to the great warriors, and Qhorin Halfhand is probably the great warrior of the Night's Watch.
Qhorin is someone who's got an ease with himself and with his position. It's kind of, he's like an elite special forces member.
They'll hit us in force, and they won't run away when we hit back.
I think Qhorin sees the same things in Jon Snow that Lord Commander Mormont sees in him, that this is a boy who could, with the right guidance, grow up to be a real leader.
The path that Commander Mormont has laid out for Jon is an exciting path, and it really is. He's grooming him for command of the Night's Watch, but it's a long, slow path into a young man. The goal that Mormont has set out for him is a goal that's far out in the future, and with Qhorin, he has a chance to do what he always imagined doing, which is getting out there in the world, and it's a lot more exciting to Jon. It's kind of a fast track for Jon to go out there and go on this mission with Qhorin.
I hope you make a better ranger than you do as steward.
What did you see in your dream? Something bad?
Brandon's definitely been abandoned. I mean, his father left and promised he'd come back before too long, and is never coming back. His mother's absence probably seems even more inexcusable. Why hasn't Catelyn come back? So I think he's kind of befuddled.
It's having a greater effect on his younger brother, who has less ability to rationally get his head around why his parents, who loved him so much, may have suddenly abandoned him.
Stop it.
Brandon's got very few figures left, so he's trying to figure out his place in the world. He's starting to realize that there's something even beyond being crippled. There's something unusual about him in that he's having these very strange dreams or visions.
And so he's got a lot to deal with. He really needs to come around to the idea that this really is something he's going to have to grab the reins on, because he has no choice. People learn from past experience, and children especially, from the time you're very young. Your picture of the way the world works is developed almost like a scientific method, where you try something and you see what happens. You throw some piece of behavior out there and you see what the world throws back at you. In Joffrey's case, every single thing he's ever done, every single piece of shittiness he's ever thrown out there at somebody has never come back to hit him. This is the literal version. This is the first time the shit comes back to hit him. You can just see the look of shock on his face when the obvious happens. That somebody is giving you what you've been giving people since you were 4 years old.
To me, it was about the fact that this is a little boy who's realizing that he isn't God as much as he would like to be. You really get a sense to see the other side of Joffrey, this little boy that he really truly is, and the fear that comes involved there.
I think this really brings those fears to the surface and probably makes him hunker down even more, and puts his siege mentality into high gear. This is a wake-up call for somebody who was maybe a bit more open to change. Would be an occasion for self-improvement. I think with Joffrey, this is going to have the opposite effect, and it's going to make him a worse person, not a better person.
I don't think Arya is anybody's little girl anymore. I mean, I don't think she would take kindly to anyone calling her someone's little girl. I mean, look, she's still devoted to her father's memory, and I think Ned is still an incredibly strong presence in her life, but her father was the most honorable man she knew, and she saw where that got him. You know, he was the best man that she knew and always lived according to his code and ended up getting his head chopped off on a stage in front of thousands of people. So for her right now, it's about survival, and it's quite clear to her that being honorable does not ensure survival, and in fact, probably the opposite. It probably makes you more vulnerable.
This whole season is really the season where Dany learns the lesson of self-reliance. It's a very painful lesson for her to learn. I mean, she's lost all of her people, she's lost her husband, she's lost her blood riders. The temptation for her has always been to lean on someone else, a man of one kind or another. So I think for her, what she's learning in this episode especially is that she can't trust in other people. Ultimately, she ends up in a place where she needs to do things for herself, and she needs to do things that nobody in the world could possibly do except her.
Dany is so defined by her dragons. They're so much a part of her identity at this point. They define her so much that when they're taken from her, it's almost like she reverts to the pre-dragon Daenerys. You know, everyone is a bit defined by who they were when they were an adolescent, you know, no matter how old you get, no matter how powerful you get. And Daenerys was a scared, timid, abused adolescent. And I think when her dragons are taken from her, all those feelings, all those memories and emotions are re-triggered and come back. And all the confidence that she's won over the last several months, it's as if that just evaporates and she's back to being a really frightened little girl. To Cersei, it kind of feels like the walls are closing in on her and all the people she loves are being taken from her, and all of her enemies are getting more and more powerful. So you can kind of see her getting more and more paranoid. But on the other hand, it's not necessarily paranoia if you're right.
And when she starts making a confession to Tyrion, I mean, this is somebody who she has a sort of a hate-hate relationship with. She really does not like her brother, and she really doesn't trust her brother. And when she finds herself in a position where she has to confide in him because there's nobody else around, that's a pretty good sign that things have gotten pretty dire for her.
One of the things I think makes Tyrion such a compelling character is that he is able to see the humanity in people who don't show it very often. He mentions in the first season his sympathy for cripples, bastards, and broken things. And Cersei is absolutely one of those broken things.
One of my favorite moments of acting in the whole series is not even a dialogue-driven moment. It's when she is trying to confide in him, but she can't do it, and he's trying to console her, but he doesn't know how. And that moment of intimate awkwardness between them, and the way that Peter and Lena play that moment is I think, is one of the high points of the season for me.
It's easy to forget, I guess, that Jaime is this famous killer, because we haven't seen him really since midway through the first season where he kills Jory and fights with Ned. We haven't seen that side of Jaime. You hear about it, people talk about, you know, what a great fighter he is and everything, but you don't see it that often. And the truth is, that's the real Jaime. The real Jaime Lannister isn't, you know, the good-looking kind of charming rogue. The real Jaime is the monster. You know, he's a beast, and this is what he loves to do, and it's what he does better than just about anyone in this world. And you know, the scene, he doesn't have anything against his cousin. I mean, his cousin's a perfectly nice kid, and they're having a very good conversation. But the moment they put Alton Lannister into that pen with him, Jaime knows exactly what he's going to do. The second time you watch the scene is when it really starts to become chilling for me, because Jaime's really going into depth about you know, his own past experiences. And when you know that this whole time he's just waiting for the right moment to beat this kid to death, it just makes it really, really dark and savage. And it's, you know, I think it's one of Nikolai's great moments.
Theon is making quite a mess of things by this point. I think that Theon, the main driving compulsion at this point is to belong. And I think from the beginning, it's always been the thing he's wanted. This new way of looking at himself, this new unconflicted way of looking at himself is pushing every decision he makes.
I think self-conscious is a good word for Theon. You get the sense that natural leaders, whether it's Ned Stark or Robb Stark, there's a kind of natural confidence there, and they stand up in front of men and they expect these men to follow them, and the men do. And with Theon, there's, I think, a certain nervousness, because he's never really been a leader.
Unlike someone like Joffrey, who I think you can say is a bad person, Theon isn't unambiguously a bad person in that way. His expression when he sees what he's done You can see that it's just a piece of him dies when he sees that, and it pushes him even further into very dark psychological territory. Robb's sense of honor and his ideals were built on his father and his mother both.
Tell me this isn't true.
He's fighting this war, and his mother has just done something terrible in his eyes.
Jaime Lannister has played you for a fool. You've weakened our position.
It makes him wonder, why are you following this code to the letter, and why are you so committed to loyalty, honor, dignity, duty, beyond, to the exclusion of all else, when nobody else around you really is? And is that a smart thing to do, or is that a stupid thing to do? His father was that way. What happened to his father? It all becomes too much in a way that's, I think, weirdly reminiscent of what Jaime says, where just at a certain point, all of the different promises that you've made start to conflict with each other, and something has to give somewhere. Robb definitely is hyper aware of what it would mean to break his oath to Walder Frey.
And you're marrying her for a bridge.
An important bridge.
What's so great about Talissa is that she asks deep, kind of probing questions. She's forcing him to confront his own idealism in a critical way that I think he finds challenging, but also makes her much more attractive to him.
I don't want to marry the Frey girl.
Maybe it's almost a bit of realism kind of seeping into his world, and a recognition and acknowledgement that people aren't perfect, and that sometimes your own wishes and your own desires and your own happiness does need to play a role in your life. I think it was a crack in his worldview that let all of these questions start to seep in a little bit.
You're as disgusted by the fact that he apparently killed these boys.
I treated the Stark boys with honor, and they repaid me with treachery.
You treated them with honor? By butchering them?
As much as she looks like she just wants to slap him across the face, I think she also wants to rescue him from this predicament he's found himself in.
Every man in the North wants to see you hanged.
She's a Greyjoy, and he's a Greyjoy, and there aren't that many of them. You know, they're the only two surviving children of Balon and their deceased mother. And you have this quiet moment between the two of them. As much as there is rivalry and animosity and jealousy and all the rest, there's some love there, and that's, I think, what kind of makes the relationship more tragic, is that if it was complete hatred, you know, all the way through, it starts to get a little bit boring after a while, because that's a kind of a one-note relationship. But, you know, like many familiar relationships, this one is very complex.
Don't die so far from the sea.
Younger boys are off fighting his war.
I think Tyrion really believes what he says, which is that to have the king on the front lines is great for the morale of the troops, and that's what, you know, Robert always did. Robert, for all his failings as a king, was a great leader on the battlefield. He would charge into battle with no regard to his own safety.
His place is not on the battlefield.
Cersei is a bit paranoid, and she has some justification. She knows that Tyrion despises her son Joffrey, so it makes sense to her that Tyrion would try to have Joffrey killed in a way that no one could possibly blame Tyrion. So she becomes convinced that this is all a plot on Tyrion's part.
We know that she can be vicious and dangerous and take pleasure in the pain of others.
Why are you smiling?
Cersei wants to undermine Tyrion in any way possible, and Tyrion doesn't have that many intimates.
She thinks she's got him because she's found his horror, and she's smart enough to know that he's fallen in love with this woman, the irony being that she's got the wrong girl.
Ros had been with Tyrion in the first season. Tyrion gave her a necklace. You understand why she thought that Ros was the whore that Tyrion was in love with, and feels that if she takes this young lady as a hostage, she can ensure Joffrey's health on the battlefield.
That's an open declaration of war. Now I think Tyrion knows how formidable she is and how hateful she is.
Tyrion has to pretend that Cersei got the right woman. It's a little bit of a two-part game he's playing. I mean, there's the real anger, which is that Cersei has just tortured this innocent woman. And then there's the stage anger, which is that Tyrion has to play it as he would if Cersei had taken Shae.
Here, yes, now the rains.
And how our personality-wise couldn't be more different. And Bronn is a good time kind of a guy, and actually lots of fun to be around. And the Hound barely says a word to most people, but beneath the surface of that, they're very, very similar. They're men who have fought in lots of battles, and they're both men who have surrounded themselves with death. Neither is particularly afraid of it. I don't think either of them cares very much or at all what other people think about them. The antagonism they show to each other is really is just a function of who their bosses are. The fact that at the end of this scene they agree to sit down and have a drink together is a kind of acknowledgement of not just the fact that they're both on the same side of this fight, but the fact that they're fundamentally very similar people.
At that point in the battle, Tyrion sees that there's no choice, and desperate times call for desperate measures. He's the only person who can lead the charge at this point. And Tyrion is not a warrior, but he's brave. It's in some ways a more admirable bravery because he's more afraid in some ways than anyone out there.
There's a very subtle choice that Peter made in that scene, which deviates from the script, which I think was brilliant. When he actually played the moment, Peter says it twice. Once he says it under his breath to himself.
I'll lead the attack.
And you can see the look of shock on his face that he's actually made this decision. And then he says it again.
I'll lead the attack!
And I think that choice is such a smart choice, and that choice is really at the crux of the question, which is Tyrion surprised by his own actions? And he's definitely surprised.
So I think what's really interesting about Tyrion in the season is that you see him kind of emerging from some of that selfishness. You really see him wanting to be a good leader, a good politician, a good high-ranking member of this government. He's not an action hero at all. At the same time, he does have this core of bravery there and a realization that leaders have to step forward. So you might as well go out there and go out fighting.
There's our brave men knocking at our door. Let's go kill them!
Cersei is having a tough year. And it's interesting because her late husband was a notorious drunk, and she's starting to drink more and more herself, and she's just in a bad place right now. And the one thing that seems to give her any comfort, aside from torturing Tyrion, is drinking.
I think from her point of view, she doesn't really know what Tyrion's plan is. She hasn't got a clue of that. She sees this vast army coming to overwhelm her city, and she knows that if they do that, her fate will be sealed, that there is only one thing going to happen to her and her family, and they will suffer a fairly unpleasant death.
Sansa's just so perfect in every way, and she's so naive, and at a certain point, the naivete, I think, just wears thin for Cersei, and she's like, this girl has seen enough that at this point she should have a better sense of the way the world really works. And so Cersei has kind of taken it upon herself to educate Sansa, and she kind of delights in shocking Sansa, and I think she takes a kind of perverse pleasure in watching Sansa squirm as she explains the ways of the world to her. I think there's a real, fairly radical change in Daenerys that happens over the course of the last couple episodes this season, which is, for most of the season, she's been looking for help from others, and asking for help. And by the end of the season, she realizes that she has to do it herself. She's got to help herself, and that she can't ask others to give her power. She's got to take it, and that she can't rely on anyone else, really. Daenerys Targaryen is not in a position where she can inherit the Iron Throne. The only way she's going to take the Iron Throne and take back the Seven Kingdoms is to conquer them. And she's starting to learn what that means. I don't think she really knew before, even when she was asking Khal Drogo to conquer them for her, I don't think she really knew what that meant. And she's starting to, and it's going to mean warfare, it's going to mean slaughter, it's going to mean a lot of people dying, because that's, the only way to conquer anything is through destruction. And I think by the end of the second season, you're seeing her really start to come into her own. Certainly, there were those out there who saw what Tyrion did, but many more did not, and went from being acting as the hand of the king to lying in a bloody bed in a small, dank chamber somewhere in the bowels of the Red Keep. His position has plummeted greatly in the time that he was unconscious, and to make matters worse, he's being tended to by a man who he threw into a dungeon cell not that long ago, and things have gotten pretty bad pretty quickly for Tyrion. And so unjustly, because of course, if it weren't for Tyrion, the city would have fallen. I mean, he really saved the day. And not only was he not rewarded for that, he was punished for that.
It's a fantasy show, and these are elements of this world that are not elements of our world. I think the characters in the show react to them in ways that are very realistic, and they're ways that are very similar to the ways we would react if all of a sudden magic were to happen in our world and become a feature of our world. I mean, the magic almost always tends to come from the boundaries. The magic comes from the east, the far east, where Melisandre is from, and where Daenerys has her dragons. The magic comes from the north, where The White Walkers are massing an undead army, but it's closing in on the center, but the people in the center don't know it yet, and we're ahead of many of the characters in the story on that front. And of course, the stuff in the north with the White Walkers, that's in a way, the ultimate threat that everybody faces, whether or not any of them are willing to admit it yet. And we just couldn't think of any better way to end the season than that. And it's going to make very, very clear to people exactly what the people of Westeros, all the people of Westeros, are facing once the winter comes.